GreyMargin was black and David was white. Let's take a look at the game. So I won't go too much into the specifics of why D2 isn't played anymore. It's hard to call it a mistake, but I will say, the AI does give it a minus like 4% just for move 6 or 7 in the game, which is pretty significant. Long story short, without going to the full specifics, the idea being that if we play a move like J3, so this is kind of the natural sequence we expect, right? We expect D2, C3, J3. We don't actually like where D2 is. So let's just say we were to play J2 and we were to forget the exchange, white plays elsewhere. We wouldn't play at D2 here later on. Later on, we'd rather play at C3 because now this stone, this stone at F3 can be treated a little bit lightly, and this wall is not going to be particularly effective because you have this stone at J3 as well. So if you kind of reverse the order of the moves, if you already played J3, you don't want to now play D2. You'd much rather play at C3. So that's why you typically don't see D2 here.
Yeah.
Not a huge mistake, but if we're losing 4% in the first 2 or 3 moves, something we can easily cut out, right?
Yeah.
So all this is good. This is sometimes played. It does leave open some interesting variations, David. It is playable, but it's definitely more of a complicated variation. I think what we'll typically see is just M17.
Okay.
Much more safe. It does that peep here is much less prevalent. This ends up becoming quite a dangerous variation for both sides. But I don't want to call this a mistake. It's more just I don't see it too often. So interestingly, I can see why you would be inclined to pincer from this side, but I think because you've already played this high stone at O16, I would rather kind of build up a formation on the upper side of the board. This area is really not that interesting right now because the best that black could do is something like this. If black plays here, then white gets a nice pincer by playing here. So black would probably, if black were to do anything, would play here, but that doesn't really put much pressure on these stones anyway. And it still leaves open an invasion here. If black were to go even closer, again, that leaves open that invasion here. So kind of short story, I think this upper side is a little bit more interesting, more space for white to play around with because it does have this high stone here. And 2, there's really not a good place for black to play here. So we kind of want to leave this left side alone for now and focus more on the top side of the board. So I would probably do this in the game too, but when I was doing my review, the AI much prefers just to play here.
Okay.
My guess, and it's very complicated, is that typically white will play elsewhere. And if black decides to Hane, white will, play something like this to capture the stone. And so the Hane is not actually that severe because white's still going to capture the stone and there's not going to be that much territory to happen here. Now, the difference between pushing here first, like you did in the game, and then playing away, really the only difference is there's no cut here anymore. Whereas if you don't play it, and you just play here, white plays here, and black eventually pushes here, there's more of a cut because there's actually some sort of aji you can get here, right? That's the big difference.
Okay.
But very small. It's kind of a minute thing, but it's a common enough variation where it should be easy to. Peter, I think you have your background audio on. Do you mind muting yourself? Milan, are you able to mute Peter just while it looks like he has background on?
Yep.
Thank you. Cool. Thanks. And so again, for that same reason, or for a similar reason, G16 is actually not as large as it seems because if black doesn't really want to make territory over here, this isn't an interesting side of the board for black. So if black plays here, white's just going to be very happy to capture here. And similarly, if black were to jump out here, white can play here and start to map out something over here. So neither way is going to be particularly advantageous for black to play right now.
Okay, so this would have been a good time to play in the bottom or the right.
I think so. This seems to be the focal point of the board.
Yeah.
Whether you play a knight's move here or 3-3, I think both are very defensible.
Okay.
Um,
One of the things I'm working on is when to keep my opponent from developing a big moyo. The timing is, I'm not getting it right yet.
okay. Well, to be fair, this was yourself developing the moyo too, so I could see why you play here. It feels like
Right.
it feels like
I
you're getting
thought,
to like the top of the mountain type of thing, right? Like this is a focal
right.
point, but
It felt like
it's
I had
not.
a wall facing stuff I had control over.
Yeah. And so again, this area is not particularly interesting for black. It's really only like getting black 3, 4, 5 points here,
Yeah.
because even if white were to play here, there's still quite a lot of Aji here for black. Black can very easily invade or cause trouble, some amount of trouble here. So even this move, even though it's getting black a little territory, it's not really hurting white very much.
Okay.
Right.
And then coming back and playing here, like the combination of both G16 and D13 is quite odd, right? Because you play G13 so you don't have to play D13. Because the idea being that if you play elsewhere and black jumps, you can put a lot of pressure on this black group. Right? That's what you want to be doing here.
Okay.
So that, even if black lives here, it's not going to be happy life. And you can solidify territory as you do this. And this is how you want to attack. You want to get territory while keeping your opponent weak.
So my G16 and my D13 were two different strategies played in the same game.
Sort of. It's kind of like they're Miai, basically.
Right.
And you're playing both of the Miai.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. I will look more for that.
But it also makes sense, right? Like if you were to try to kill the stone, you wouldn't want to do it so closely because then these extra stones at the E, F, and G line aren't really doing much, right? If you were trying to do something here, you'd probably want to do it more on a larger scale.
Okay.
Right. So then something like this might happen, right? And this would be more playable. Whether I would recommend F11, hard to say, but this is just losing out. Like even if all black does is just do things like this, or maybe something like this. Excuse me. White's not actually getting very much territory here, right? Okay. And so black has done a very successful reduction. I think probably it's a little unreasonable for black to do all this. Maybe it'll live, but I think the wall is way too strong. Also, white could probably play here to prevent the kind of connection, to prevent black from living underneath. This is kind of what I would expect to happen. Something like this, where black will live, but white gets a really strong thickness. So in this particular situation, I think white has no choice but to play here.
Okay.
It also better protects the influence over here, and you don't really have to worry too much about the cuts because black has its own weaknesses to worry about right now. So the cuts are not actually going to be that problematic. In the game, I think white let black get off a little bit too easy here.
Yeah.
No reason to add this move. I would just play elsewhere.
Okay.
Even if white plays here, this isn't even sente to kill the group. I would play here, white plays here, and then black can do something like this and be perfectly alive. And when you look at the territory that white really only got about 10 points here and the wall, but black has solidified this entire lower corner. So this would be a really good result for black to play away. And again, here, these moves at B5 and B7, they're just a little bit too small right now. There's much larger spaces in this lower right corner.
I'm trying to work on that.
And then again, C2, right? We're focusing on 5 points here. We're not focusing on large scale. These 3 stones on the lower side are not weak. These white stones are also not weak. This is just a territory move. It's not attacking anything. It really needs to be focusing on R6 or the 3-3 point down here.
Okay.
Or maybe something like this too to put pressure on these stones. again, a little bit small. We're focusing on, I guess the thought is we're looking at this really thick white wall and afraid of it, and we want to reduce its influence. But if we were to, to just take a territory move like here or here, it's not easy for black to be attacked here, right? It's not easy for white to get a good attack. Something like this could happen, and it's unclear what white's really getting. Black has solidified some corner, solidified the side here, and this wall is really being rendered useless.
And
white
black
has
still
almost
gets
no
F5.
territory.
What was that?
And white has almost no territory.
And white has almost no territory, yeah.
I was worried about that.
And so David, what was the thought with this move?
I think I saw black creeping up, and basically my wall, I saw the use of my wall going away, and this kind of stopped the encroachment. But I see from your previous discussion that the bottom right is where really all the potential is.
So I think you've hit on half of it. So I agree, the bottom right is really where all the potential is. But what do you use a wall for? What do you use thickness to do?
Well, to chase a weak group into it, and there
Yeah,
are no weak groups nearby.
So bide your time, right? The idea
Okay.
that you want to use your thickness to stop a strong group from getting into your territory, it kind of goes against just go
Okay.
theory of, you use strength to attack. You don't
Okay.
use strength to get territory, because in that, going back a bit, right? It's like this, right? Like you're using strength to get territory, but then you're not actually using that strength. You're not ending up using these E, F, and G stones very well.
Okay. I will get it one of these days.
It's a tough concept because everyone's like, I want to get territory. It's the name of the game, but it's like it's overkill, right? You're using too much force to kill a rabbit, to kill a rabbit, basically, right?
So several of my recent games, I've gotten really nice walls and not done the right thing with them. So yes, this is very helpful.
Again, we're focusing on kind of the wrong part of the board here. I don't want to be a broken record, but this area just isn't interesting for either side. The best that black's going to do is maybe black plays, something like this afterwards, right? Like, or put a little bit of pressure on this group. That's, excuse me. That's really the best that black can hope for. But white doesn't really care about this area. Again, this is white's influence. White's not going to try to make territory here. White's going to try to use it to attack somehow. So if white plays here, what has black gotten with this stone? 3 or 4 points, reducing white by 3 or 4 points. Is black going to now play here? No, it doesn't make sense. And in that case, now white can play the corner. And again, what has black gotten? So don't mean to sound like a broken record, but really just kind of recognizing that both sides are viewing this thickness, I think, a little bit incorrectly, and that's having you focus on the completely wrong part of the board.
Okay.
Yeah, corners first, right?
Corners first, but it's also just fundamental theory of this isn't how we use thickness, right? And so and neither side is really gaining all that much in these moves.
Yeah.
I would just note here, white does have a lot of strength. If white wants to cut here, white could totally do that.
Okay.
I would probably push through here first to see how black responds, because if black decides to respond here, this is a profitable result for white, but you're not going to cut now. Obviously, if black chooses to respond here to keep the cut, now you kind of have a little bit more that you can deal with here. It's not clear that it's going to work, but you have a little bit of playing room. So that's kind of the idea. So if you want to push, maybe the cut doesn't work right away, but I definitely think that playing G17 might be good timing, just to see, because even if the cut doesn't work, you still have moves like this too, which are quite painful for black. And white and black really can't afford to cut because you can cut back. Again, just test black with G17, see what happens. Too small, right? Like, we'd much rather play this.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I think I saw I was behind on. I felt like I was behind, and was saying, okay, where can I get territory reliably? But that was only 4 points. So,
Yeah, I mean, I do think you're a bit behind, but not terribly, right? Like,
okay,
there is still stuff to be gained because you have to remember that, this area in the lower right is uncontested. Let's just say something very simple happens. Just a very simple variation, right?
yeah,
Black has 5, 10, 15, 20 maybe down here, maybe another 5 to 10 here, maybe another 10, 15 here. So we're looking at 35, 45, 55 for black. White has 10 to 15 in the upper right, maybe 5 to 10 in the lower right. So we're looking at 25, and whatever white can make in this area plus maybe 10 points here. So white just has to make about 30 points here to be ahead, right? And that's not, I don't think that's a huge order, because you also have to remember that there's a cut here. So that becomes an extra 10 points. There's also these hanes here, which becomes quite large as well. So I don't necessarily think white's ahead, but I don't think white's doing poorly.
okay.
So finally going to the right side of the board, good. Again, corners before sides, but still a large move, so I'm not going to fault it too much. So playing this move first is actually not that big a deal, because if black chooses to ignore and white pushes, now black could just play here, right? And if white plays here, then black just connects. It's really important to make this exchange first. Because if black plays here, then you've made a positive exchange for white and you've gotten this push at G17 for free. But by playing here, black can ignore. And so you're basically getting 3 or 4 points in Gote. So the order here really matters. So David, I think that playing here is probably a little bit too slow. Obviously, it strengthens the corner, gives white a little territory, but I think because you don't want to build up this black wall even further, it's really important to get Sente now. So maybe something like maybe a reduction move here. If you really think you're behind, maybe you invade, or you invade here, something like that. But playing here is just going to strengthen this black group a little bit too much,
Right.
and give black enough time to strengthen the side. So I think that black would have an advantage here.
And I basically was alive without.
And you were alive anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to be a little mindful of the time because we're at 7:20. But were there any questions on anything I went over or anything that I didn't cover that you want to look at closely?
I think that helps. I mean, I'm trying to maintain like focus on what's important, and I think it's pretty clear what I was not paying attention to while I was just letting momentum take me.
Sure.
I think noticing when I am alive and stop adding stones is something I just need to get better at.
I mean, because every time you add stones, you're making your opponent stronger.
Yeah, certainly in this situation. Yeah.
GreyMargin, anything from you?
No, I think you covered everything. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to.